Hey everybody, welcome to the Slick Tree Podcast. I'm your host, Colby Langford. The point of this show is to help improve ourselves as dogmen and to raise the quality of the dogs on the end of our lead. So let's settle in, turn the volume up, and let's see if we can't learn a trick or two together from our guests. Hey everybody, you are listening to the Slick Tree Podcast. Today, we're going a little bit outside of our normal realm, and we're going to be talking about force fetch. We've got Cortney Schaefer with us. How are you today, Courtney?
Very well. Thanks so much for inviting me.
I'm glad you could join us. So, Courtney, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Well, by hobby or by career, I should say, I'm a wildlife biologist, which means I get to spend a lot of time outside, uh, both professionally and recreationally. But I've always grown up hunting as well, although I honestly didn't get really into it until I went to college as a wildlife major, where all of my friends were also hunters as well. So I got to go hunting a lot more. And then by the time I graduated from college, I needed my first gun dog puppy. So that was the gift that I got for myself. And then I've just gotten deeper and deeper into that world ever since. So I live in South Central Nebraska. I'm still an incredibly avid hunter for both upland game, pheasants, prairie chickens, sharptails, rabbits, squirrels, whatever we come across. A little bit of waterfowl hunting. And then we also do a lot of blood tracking and deer recoveries for folks that have wounded deer with archery equipment. So, anyways, the other thing that has gotten me really deep into this world is just the training and testing system. Because if I want to go out and hunt with a really well prepared dog, I find that it's best to have them trained to the appropriate level and tested. So, back in 2013, I became a German hunting dog judge as well. So, not only do I train and test my own dogs, but I spend a lot of my free time in the spring and in the fall evaluating other people's German bred dogs to ensure that they're also prepared for that hunting season.
The Germans really do something special. Whenever I got my wire hair, I kind of dove into. I bought the NAVDA book and the Dutch Drathar training manual book and read through all of them, which didn't really go through didn't go through with a lot of it, but just kind of to figure out what I had bought myself. That's a really neat system for breeding, training, and raising dogs.
It is. And, personally, I currently own Deutsch Drahthaars. And the beauty of the Drahthaar is that it is this versatile breed. It is a jack of all trades. So that same dog can go out duck hunting in the morning and excel pheasant hunting late morning. And then we can go blood track a deer for somebody. All of these things are possible. But again, that requires a lot of training. And so I'm excited to come on today and talk a little bit about force fetch because that is an important part of the training for most Drahthaars. And again, they have a really strong natural retrieve, but it's important for us to hone that ability. And I guess we can dive into that when you're ready too, and just talk about why it might be necessary for our dogs, but as well as any dog that people are out hunting any sort of game with.
Before we really get going, I would you like to plug your YouTube channel? That's how I found you, and ended up contacting you to ask you to come on here. But you've got some great videos on there that could help people that want to go farther with this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So it is at prairiefluestall.com, I believe. Sorry, I'm not used to plugging it. No, sorry, just at Prairie-Fluestal. So it's all in German. So Fluestal is spelled Flustal. I imagine you can easily throw a link in uh, your promotion for this
Mm-hmm.
talk. But at any rate, I started the channel just because I felt like force fetch and a lot of other training techniques are something that anybody can do at home if they just have the time and the know-how. There's a lot of books on the subject, but it's hard to read a book and then apply that to something in person with your dog. It's really something better learned in person. So I was hoping that through the video series, just breaking it down step by step, that people could see that this is something they can do every day rather than sending their dog to a very expensive trainer, which pro trainers can do a great job too. But most of our dogs would rather stay home with us and work with us, even if we don't totally know what we're doing, as opposed to getting shipped off for a few months to live in a kennel. So with the channel, again, there's a step-by-step video series on how to complete force fetch. So if you're interested in doing it with your dog, you can kind of see how I worked through it every day with my dog. I thought it was important too to do the video series just to show that no dog is perfect. And so many of the videos you see online just say, we do the step and the dog does this. And they don't tell you what to do if your dog isn't behaving like the one in the video.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to see me make some corrections with my dog, and then how I do have to back up whenever she makes a mistake, so that we can build up her confidence before we move forward and progress to the next step. So force fetch is really just a dance. Sometimes you're going forward each day, and sometimes you got to go backwards, but you make progress incrementally every single day if you just continue with it. So I hope that people will find that useful. And I have articles I've written as well, but I think the videos are really the most helpful thing to see someone force fetch a dog. Know that you can do it too.
Before we get going, so I'd been into squirrel dogs for over 10 years and had been on all the forums, all the Facebook groups, and I'd never even heard of force fetching until I got in my first bird dog, and then I heard people start referencing it, and that was the first I'd ever heard about it. So, can you tell us just a little bit about what force fetch is and why someone would want to force fetch a dog?
Sure. And, I might start by saying I don't love the name force fetch because it implies that you're using a lot of physical force. And while we are using some, because we are teaching a dog a new command that they must follow, not something optional, perhaps trained retrieve might be a better term that people are starting to use a little more often. I'm still titling everything as force fetch just so people know that's what we're getting back to, is this particular item. But anyways, what we're doing in force fetch is we're developing what in most dogs is already a somewhat natural instinct to retrieve, and honing it so that we can tell the dog where to go make a retrieve, when to make a retrieve, even if there's no external stimulus happening beforehand. So a lot of dogs, if you just throw something, they'll go and retrieve it because they like that predator prey type interaction of chasing something down and grabbing it, and then they like their owner, so they want to bring it back and show them. But in force fetch, what we're saying is, hey, you might not have seen the bird fall. I'm telling you, go out and retrieve something, and you are trusting me as the dog that there's something out there for you to get. You're going to grab it, and not only are you going to grab it, you are going to bring it back and present it to me so that I can take the game from you. So it helps a lot with making sure that your dog is comfortable with making blind retrieves where there's no mark beforehand. And then just having really good manners too, because a lot of us, as we harvest this game, we're really excited about eating it, preparing it for meals. So it needs to be edible game. So it's not valuable to us to have a dog that goes out and is so hard-mouthed that it brings something back damaged to the point of making it inedible, or something like that. So throughout the force fetch process, we're also teaching the dog to have proper manners so that they bring back the game and it's still fit for the table. And you can trust that dog to get it whether they saw the actual fall happen or not. So I think it's important then to talk about too why you would want to have your dog force fetched. And as I mentioned earlier, in my world, we have to have our dogs pass at least a couple of hunting tests, one of which involves quite a few retrieves, in order for them to become certified for breeding, so that we can then breed them and receive our registration papers from Germany and continue on with the line. So we literally have to test them. They have to be properly force fetched to pass the test. I shouldn't say they have to be. They will do much better at the test if they're properly force fetched. So it's kind of a must for us. But I realize not everybody is going to test their dog. So, in our test, the dogs must go out and complete both marked and blind retrieves of several different game species, both feathered and furred. And they have to come back and sit and present the game, and the handler should be able to take it from their mouth without any sort of extra commands. Shouldn't have to play tug of war or keep away or any of those fun games. But what I have found that is in real hunting situations, it's so wonderful to have that foundation because, again, the dogs don't see everything fall. I know when I used to live in Wisconsin and we grouse hunted a lot, there were a lot of grouse that got shot where the dogs heard the shot. They had no clue where the grouse was. Even if they just pointed it, they couldn't see it falling. So it was so nice to just give them a line and just point in a general direction and say fetch and know that they were going to go off in the woods and they were going to search until they found that grouse and bring it back to me. And I imagine that happens with some squirrel hunters as well, where your dog may not always be aware of where the squirrel fell. Um, and I don't squirrel hunt a ton, so I don't know if this is always the case, but like grouse hunting, pheasant hunting, I don't want to be very loud when I'm hunting because I don't want to spook all the other game in the area. So it's really nice to just be able to give one quick fetch command and the dog goes out and gets it instead of me hollering and trying to redirect the dog and walking all over the place trying to help them find the game. I just want them to go out, go back in, and then we can keep hunting and hopefully there's more game in the area that we'll find shortly thereafter. But again, the big thing is we just want to have the game fit for the table. So having a dog that's trained to properly pick up game, hold it nicely, and bring it to you so that you can cook it up later that evening without more damage would be great.
What are some things that your dog needs to have down before you begin the force fetch process? As far as just commands, I imagine here, sit.
Yeah, just some general obedience would be wonderful if the dog already knows how to sit, stay, heel, and come on command or have a recall. Those four commands are really the basis that I start with because as I'm force fetching a dog, I'm going to ask them to do all of those things while holding game in their mouth. So life is much easier if they're already familiar with all those things. And really, force fetch is just advanced obedience. So even if you're working with this is your first hunting dog, if you've owned dogs before, if you have any familiarity with any sort of obedience training, you can easily force fetch your own dog too.
What age do you like to force fetch one? Is there a too early? Is there a too late?
Great question. I once had a puppy buyer try to force fetch his 4-month-old puppy, and then he complained to me that it just kept biting his arm. Like, well, he still has tiny, sharp puppy teeth. Inappropriate. So the first thing is they need to have all of their adult teeth in before you think about starting. Just because they're feeling some discomfort anyways, those teeth are coming in. The last thing we want to do is do more manipulation with their mouth when they're feeling discomfort. So for most dogs, that's going to be 5 to 6 months of age before their full set of adult teeth are in. So typically the earliest I would start a dog is right at that 5 to 6 month old mark. And then it varies by dog too. I mean, typically in a lot of breeds, the females are a little faster maturing mentally. So you might be able to start a female earlier. You know, a male, you might need to wait a little longer. But with that said, I've force broke 6-month-old males with no problems, but just something to be aware of. Some dogs just aren't mentally prepared for it yet. So I've also seen people where they might start it at 6 months and just feel like the dog isn't getting it and then just stop and just wait another month or two and then go back to try it again. Because you want a dog that's enjoying the process and focused and physically big enough to like hold some of the types of game and the dummies that you're going to ask it to retrieve. But typically around then, the other thing I would tell folks is that I don't like to force fetch dogs during the active hunting season. I don't want them to have any sort of confusion where, you know, at home or in the yard, I might be need to, you know, inflict a physical correction like an ear pinch on a squirrel dummy and then the next day be mad at them for not wanting to retrieve a squirrel. I think it just can be really confusing. So even if I feel like a dog is the right age, if it's the middle of hunting season, I'm going to wait till hunting season finishes. We'll finish that particular hunting season with some sloppy retrieves, you know, whatever it takes to get through it, just to get them the exposure to game. I mean, that's the most important thing. And then I'll start force fetch the day after hunting season ends.
Do you have much experience with the other end of the spectrum where maybe there's an older dog, maybe somebody's got a really nice 3 or 4 year old squirrel dog, but the dog listens pretty well as far as a recall command, but maybe whenever you shoot a squirrel out, if you don't have the dog tied back, maybe the dog wants to run off and eat half your squirrel before you can get him chased down. Because I've seen a handful of dogs that were like that.
I don't see a lot of older dogs in the German system just because our dogs have to pass
Hmm.
that second test of the retrieving before they're 2 years of age. So typically people don't train after that or start force fetch after that. However, I have had some client dogs that are around that 2-year-old mark. And I know people always say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and that's not true. It's just it's going to be a longer process, with an older dog, especially if they already have that habit built in of every time you shoot, they get to bolt, and it's a race to beat the squirrel so they can eat it. But I think that dog is an ideal candidate for force fetch, because then you get to work with them and teach them that they're going to get a far greater reward if they find that squirrel and then bring it back to you, um, than if they just get to eat half the squirrel. So again, I guess I go back to where I said force fetch is a bit of a misnomer. I mean, I do apply some corrections when necessary, but for the most part, what I'm doing and what a lot of trainers do is they force fetch the dogs is use a lot more positive reinforcement than negative. So honestly, the cheapest, easiest thing to do is just go to Walmart and buy a big block of cheese, and then cut it up into little cubes. I've yet to find a dog who doesn't like cheese. And then every time we do a force fetch session, I just have a little treat pouch filled with some of those cheese cubes. And every time they hold a dummy, they get a tiny piece of cheese. And I have a squirrel dummy that all of my dogs particularly love, where I just skinned out a squirrel and slid the hide on a canvas dummy, which would be really easy for anybody to do too. So once they're doing well on just a normal canvas dummy, plastic dummy, I start rotating in that squirrel dummy so they get used to holding that too, even with the fur. It is a lot more exciting for them. And then eventually I'll thaw out a squirrel carcass and we'll do some squirrel retrieves in the yard. But every single time they bring it back to me, they get cheese and they get a huge amount of verbal praise. And so they start to just enjoy the process of, oh my gosh, this is so fun to bring this game back to mom or to dad or whoever. And then I get cheese and they're happy with me. And then we get to keep going. And I just feel like the dogs really recognize when the handler is so pleased with them, and they want to continue to do good work. Again, most dogs, I'm not familiar with all the different breeds that are used for squirrel hunting, but in the gun dog breeds in particular, there's this built-in cooperation where they want to be good dogs.
Hmm.
So we just need to show them what we want, and then they can follow through with it and get the cheese reward. And when I'm actually hunting, I'm not carrying a handful of cheese in my pocket as we're out pheasant hunting or anything, but it's so built in as a habit by that point that any pheasant they retrieve without me saying a word, they just automatically pick it up and bring it back because they know that that's what makes me happy. It's what makes them happy. Win, win, win.
Yeah, I feel like as a whole, the versatile dog breeds probably have a little bit higher biddability
Mm.
than a lot of the squirrel dog breeds. They breed, especially on the competition side, they breed a lot more independence from other dogs and just kind of in general independence, that I feel like probably knocks the biddability scale on them down a little bit.
Ah,
Just so you're aware of that.
sure. Well, and maybe a squirrel hunter then needs to have a handful of cheese in their pocket as they hunt. But I find using a lot of treats early on is a really nice way to offset some of the negative reinforcement because I do have a dog occasionally refuse a retrieve, particularly like a blind retrieve where they're hot or whatever. They don't want to go do it, and it's nice to just know that I can make them do it no matter what. But again, I should mention too that with these German bred dogs, and I imagine with a lot of the squirrel breeds as well, it's a massive reward for the dog to get the squirrel in their mouth,
Hmm.
whether they know to retrieve it or not. So I really like using force fetch and retrieving as a big reward for the dog. Because like with my dogs, we're having them for the most part point first. And so the reward for pointing is we shoot the bird, they get a retrieve. Um, and so I imagine with squirrel hunting too, I mean, all your dogs probably want to go grab that squirrel. It's just kind of more a matter of teaching them to bring it back to you unharmed. That would be the harder part,
Hmm.
but something that's certainly doable and can be done by working through the small steps of the process. I should say too, force fetch for those that aren't familiar, it generally takes 2 to 4 weeks per dog. So it's not an incredibly long process, but it's just something where I'm working with the dog every single day for 2 to 4 weeks. So when we talked about timing earlier, I should have mentioned you also start the dog when you know that you will be home for 2 to 4 weeks, where every single night before dinner or whatever kind of time frame you have set, you have 15 minutes you can give to your dog. So if you know you have to go out of town for work for a week, don't start force fetch the week before. Wait till you're home. Don't do it right before Christmas when you might be traveling for family stuff. pick a time where you can consistently commit to 15 minutes a day at least with your dog for 2 to 4 weeks straight.
Okay, so how do you get started? So you've got this dog here. He's got a fair handle on come, on sit, on stay. How do you begin the process?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I like to do with a dog is to just have them practice holding a dummy. And some people start with something even simpler, like a paint roller. I just start with a little 2 inch diameter canvas dummy. So something small and easy for them to hold. And we just start by, you can have them on the floor, up on a table, whatever works best for you. But I just have a rug in the corner of a room where I usually start with this. And I just have the dog sit and I just physically open their mouth with my hands and set the dummy in there. And they're going to fight you. Most dogs are kind of like, what are you doing? Manipulating my mouth. But if they just hold it for a split second, at that point, then I just pull the dummy out, tell them what a good dog they are, and they get a little bit of cheese. And then we're just trying to extend the amount of time that they're willing to comfortably hold that dummy. So that's all day one is, and maybe day 2 and 3 as well, depending on the dog, where they're just learning that I will open their mouth, I'm going to set a dummy in there, it's not going to hurt anything, and they just need to hold it until I let them know that it's okay to drop it. So usually I just say drop and take the dummy. So we're just extending the amount of time they're comfortable holding it. Once they're comfortable holding it, which again, some dogs will be immediately, some might take a day or 2 or 3. Then we work on movement while holding the dummy. So I might have them start heeling with me around the room. And if they drop it, I just might say a corrective command like or no, or whatever. But I'm just still going to bend over, pick up the dummy, open their mouth, put it back in, and we'll keep walking. And then we start with doing some quick little like sit, stay, and then come drills across the room, maybe where put them on a sit, stay while they're holding the dummy, step away 10, 15 feet, whatever, and then have them come. And then as they come, I want them to sit right in front of me and still maintain their hold on the dummy. And so that whole process, again, might take a few days or a whole week to get them comfortable with holding the dummy and moving around the room, whether they're on a sit stay or and then have to come to you, or if they're healing with you, just want them comfortable holding it. And then I start to introduce more of a correction at that point, where if they drop it, I start to teach them that they're the ones that are going to have to reach for it. And the way to start this is by just going back to that initial spot wherever you started, have them on a sit stay, and you're going to give them a fetch command for the first time, where you're going to hold the dummy right in front of their nose and tell them to fetch. And I will often use, it's hard to demonstrate again in a phone call, but in the videos you can see where I'm kind of using one finger from one hand to make sure I can quickly open their mouth to show them what I mean. And then with the other hand, I'm holding their ear, which is the universal sign for fetch. So this is where they first learn about an ear pinch, is what most people call it. I'm not actually pinching the ear. I'm mostly just applying pressure by holding the ear. Anyways, you just kind of push their head forward, get the dummy in their mouth, praise them a ton. Hooray, they did great. Moving on. So anyways, we're teaching them here to actually do the fetch on command. And then we're just going to go back through the whole process we just did. Like, okay, well, now you're going to grab it and heel with me. You're going to grab it and sit here and wait for me to call you, and so on. And then the next big step is getting them to pick up dummies off the ground. I know it sounds crazy, but that's always a big mental hurdle for the dogs, is they're like, well, we've been grabbing out of your hand this whole time, and now we have to grab stuff off the ground. So don't be surprised if that takes another additional few days. Just for some reason, it's a big mental hurdle. And I should mention too, the whole time I'm doing this, I'm constantly swapping dummies. I just have a bunch of easy dummies for the dogs to grab, because I want them also learning, we're not just teaching you to grab this dummy. We're teaching you to grab anything and everything that I point at. So anyways, we keep rotating through them. And then once they're picking up off the ground, then we can move outside where there's more distractions. We can make sure they're still comfortable with healing while holding a dummy, moving while holding a dummy, and picking up dummies off the ground when we're in the yard. And then once they're really solid with all of that, which, at this point, it's probably been a couple weeks since you started force fetch, then you can start to rotate in some of the actual species. So squirrels in this case would be great. I love training with squirrels. They've got really nice tough hides, so you can freeze and rethaw the same squirrel over and over again and use it a bunch of times. So I just always have a bunch of dead game in the freezer. And I start with squirrels with a lot of dogs because, again, they're one of the easiest species to grab. They have that nice short fur, and then just the shape of them is easy for dogs to pick up. And I might start by only thawing it out halfway, particularly if I think I might have a dog that wants to mouth on it or chomp,
Mm-hmm.
really chew on it. So we start with kind of a half frozen one so they can't chomp it. And then eventually, once they're doing well with retrieving through all the different phases with that, then we can thaw it out fully, and we can start sending them on blind retrieves, and we can start laying drags with it, and just making sure they know we still have the same expectations, that they always bring it back to you, they always sit and deliver, or stand and deliver. I guess that's acceptable in NAVDA and some other test organizations, like you mentioned. Or again, if you're hunting, I don't always make my dog sit to give me the pheasant. As long as they're presenting to me by standing there, I'll grab it and we can go from there. But I should have mentioned that too. Before you start force fetch, you should make sure you have a little bit of game on hand, because you're going to need it to enforce all the principles that you taught with dummies, so that you can transition over to squirrels and rabbits and birds or whatever species you're pursuing with your dog.
So to jump back just a little bit,
Sure.
can you kind of give us an outline on? And I know, and I understand every dog is going to be different, just depending on the dog. But so whenever you're beginning this process, and the first time that dog you make it mouth the bumper, how long are
Mhm.
you making that dog hold, and what kind of rate are you increasing the hold time?
Sure. So on day one of force fetch, if they are holding the bumper for a second, I'm grabbing it, because you want to grab it before they drop it. So you don't have to necessarily be hard on them and correct them there. I mean, I don't want to start being negative from the very beginning. So if I can just surprise them by grabbing it just a second after I put it in their mouth and, hey, good dog, such a good dog, here's some cheese. They start to anticipate the cheese and like, okay, I just have to stand here and hold this. No big deal. So most dogs figure out hold very quickly, and it takes longer to teach them the fetch, where they have to reach out and grab the dummy versus just holding it when you put it in their mouth. So by the end of day one, and I said 15 minutes a day earlier, day one, it might only be 5 or 10, just depending on the dog. But, in 5 or 10 minutes, you should be able to extend it where they can hold it for a few seconds. And you can say, good job, here's some cheese. Day two, you might start with a few seconds, and maybe you can get them to hold it for 5 or 10 seconds, or take a few steps with it. So it's going to be very incremental progress that's going to vary considerably based on your dog's natural inclination to hold and how food motivated they are and things like that. But I think that should at least give folks a pretty good idea of, you should be able to get them to hold the dummy for at least a second or two on day one, and then it's really easy once they're doing that to extend it out from there.
So on average, by day four, say, how long are you making them set and hold the dummy before giving them the reward?
Sure. Well, by day four, again, it would depend on the dog, but usually when I'm on day four, and again, I know what I'm doing, and I'm mostly force fetching these Drahthaars and other German bred dogs, we're usually heeling around the house with them holding a dummy, but then they're usually reaching for the dummy. They're holding it, and they might have a drop here and there, but it's where we just issue a quick and kind of point at the ground or point at the dummy, and then I might still be helping them retrieve it if they drop it on the ground, where I might grab it and then still make them reach for it, but I'm holding it at least, which is, again, weirdly infinitely easier than them just picking it up off the floor themselves. But yeah, I would usually by day four expect them to be moving with the dummy. They should be able to hold it so well they can heel with it, and for a short distance. Again, I'm doing this all in my living room, dining room, kitchen area, so I might just heel them to the other side of the house and back, and then I take it, good job, and then I might hand it to them again and heel them to a different room and have them sit there for just a few seconds. And then if they drop it, then you know that you pushed too hard and you got to back up and have them hold it for an even shorter amount of time next time, because we want to try to make them be successful. So I know that's tough, and then I don't want people to feel like they're a failure if they're on day 4 and they're still not able to heal across the room with their dog. Because again, some dogs are just going to be harder than others based on their breed and their instincts and all of that. Um, but the important thing is that if they mess up, then to step backwards to something that they understand and know. So maybe every time they move, they're dropping the dummy, but as long as they sit still, they're holding it. Well, great. We'll just have them hold it longer and longer, and then keep trying to make them move with it, but maybe have a couple fingers underneath their chin as they're walking at heel next to you so that you can kind of help them hold it. Um, I'm always trying to think of ways to help the dog be successful. And then eventually you'll want to help push them to the point where they make a mistake, because I do honestly feel like they don't really learn something until they're corrected making a mistake. But they have to progress far enough along to do that first. So again, I like to refer to it as a dance, because we're going to keep pushing forward as much as we can. But every time the dog is struggling, we're going to step back to something they're more comfortable with and work on that in a few different ways before we then try to move forward again.
What advice would you have with someone with maybe a so-called problem dog that is very chompy, isn't wanting to cooperate?
Okay, so those are two separate issues. So the chomping, that is a universal problem that we see with a lot of dogs and a lot of breeds, where they get the game in their mouth and they're either really excited or anxious or whatever other emotion. And so they're just like chewing or chomping on the game as they're bringing it back to you, or maybe as they're not bringing it back to you. And it can be really hard to fix once it's become a habit. So one of the other reasons I like doing force fetch is because early on in those first phases, as we're just getting a dog to walk around the house carrying a dummy, if I see them chomp at all, they get a soft correction. So some dogs, it's just a quick pop on the bottom of the chin, just, hey, nope, hold it. Or a lot of times it's just easier for me to pop them just quick on the tip of the nose from up top, just, we're not chomping. So you have to catch it early and try to address it while they're on just those other dummies. The other thing I found is dogs are much more likely to chomp on smaller, wetter things versus bigger dummies or something that's dry. Or we talked earlier about how much you thaw out game before you use it. So maybe you have a dog that's been progressing through force fetch really well and doesn't chomp on dummies, but as soon as you switch to a squirrel, it starts chomping. So there, what you would do is, again, start with a mostly frozen squirrel, so they can't really chomp it. They're not going to get anything out of it because it's not going to like spring back or anything. So they should lose some enjoyment. But again, you're going to have to physically correct it. Or if you have an electronic collar, they can be a wonderful tool in this case. Don't make this be the first thing you ever use your e-collar for. That should be something like healing. But it's a wonderful tool where you can just nick the dog with a low stimulation level every time you see him chomp. That can be really helpful. But like I said, I feel like a dog has to make a mistake for you to fix it. So, for instance, I recently had a friend's dog here for training that was a bad chomper, especially on quail. I mean, she chomped them so bad they were inedible. So, what we did is we thawed out pigeons. And then after I'd gone through the entire force fetch process again, where I hadn't seen her chomping while I had her, then I had to get her to chomp so that I could address it, right? So I took thawed pigeons and just soaked them in a bucket of water so they were gross and wet and little. And then I finally saw the behavior that the owners had complained about, and she was really chopping those. But I needed to get her to do it so that I could correct her. And this particular dog was e-collar conditioned, so I was able to nick her with the collar. But for her, I found it was much more useful for me to physically correct her. And so she just got a little pop on the nose. And a lot of times we would just stop walking, because I would do it mostly with her at a heel. So she was very close to me. So I had the opportunity to correct her. And if we just stopped and just sat there, she kind of got bored. And I think she realized that the more that she chomped, the more we were going to stop. And she just have to sit there instead of just finishing the retrieve and getting the food reward and moving on with our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So that really helped that particular dog. And then she got to the point where just in a couple of days, like she would hold that sopping wet pigeon perfectly and not chomp at all while she could come across the yard to deliver it to hand. And then if she was even a little shy about taking it from me at some point, knowing that she was going to get in trouble if she didn't treat it appropriately. So, like anything else, it's just really important to set the expectation with your dog and then correct it. But the biggest issue with this particular dog, and I'm imagining with a lot of dogs out there, is that we did have to go back through force fetch from the beginning, even though she hadn't had issues with a lot of the other stuff. Like I needed to go back through it with her because I did it a little differently than her owners. And then we established that expectation of here's what I need from you, here's what is acceptable behavior, here's what is not acceptable behavior. So that by the time we got back to her chomping on game, she was already having these new habits built of not jumping anymore.
Okay.
So it's a tricky one, but it's manageable.
Collar conditioning is fairly common with the squirrel dogs, but I feel like it's more so the system, the tracking systems that are most commonly used are like a Garmin Alpha. Um,
Oh sure.
and in my opinion, although they are a training system, training and tracking system, they're not really set up to be used in like a progressive type of manner. I also have a Garmin Pro 550 Plus, and like just a traditional Tritronics way to where once you're familiar with the handheld, you don't really even have to look at it to be able to step up and to adjust. It's really kind of a process on those to go through and turn settings up or down. You can have them. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but you can have them set to where your three buttons across the top will stimulate or vibrate or tone. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as say you have a problem dog and you want to nick them and then ramp up the levels, it's not as easy just turning a dial, and it's just not something that's that common.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have a Garmin Alpha that is what I use when I'm hunting with the dogs.
Hmm.
Those collars are great for telling you when they're on point and how far to walk and all that fun. But for training in the summertime or when I'm force fetching a dog, I use the Garmin Sport Pro, and it has just a manual dial, and where again, like you mentioned, without even looking, I can just have my finger on that and crank it to whatever setting might be necessary. Because, of course, with any e collar, what you want to do is use that stimulation level that is high enough to elicit a response, but yet low enough so that the dog isn't in pain or screaming out. So finding that sweet spot where the dog is just twitching their neck, maybe. I mean, that's what we're looking for, and that's going to be different for every dog, depending on the prong points you use and the coat they have and their temperament and all sorts of things. So with force fetch particularly, I want to start on a very, very low stimulation level. If I'm nicking them for chomping, I on that Garmin Sport Pro, I think there are 6 levels, and I mean I might be hitting them with a 1. I mean very, very minor, because again, if you buzz them too highly and they yelp, they're going to drop the dummy, and I don't want to create the drop. I just want to make sure that they're not um, chomping or doing something they shouldn't be doing. So again, very important that you start using the e-collar on other stuff first. I like to start with healing, where the dog gets nicked if they aren't healing perfectly with me. Don't start with the calm command either. That's a big mistake we see people do, or they get the collar just to enforce the dog coming when called. And then if you aren't very, very careful, you're just teaching the dog that every time it gets buzzed, it needs to run back to you. And we do not want that to happen. We
Hmm.
want the stimulation to mean all sorts of things, like don't mouth this game
Hmm.
or don't break on point. So many other things. So anyway, start with heel, make sure the dog is properly e-collar conditioned before putting it on for any sort of force fetch stuff.
How would you go about, or how do you go about, kind of intro to e-collar as far as e-collar conditioning one? What's the process you like to use?
Sure. Well, on my YouTube channel, I did actually post a video of just how I introduce dogs to the e-collar, and it's very similar to what I described with the healing, where it's so important for you to find that stimulation level that's going to be most effective for your dog. And again, hopefully as low as possible. And I just think healing up and down your driveway is the best way to start off with it. And, um, as I mentioned, you want to see what elicits some sort of response. So if you're hitting the dog with the half or the 1 stimulation level and they're completely ignoring it, they're not acknowledging it in any way, then, you need to maybe try a 2. But start with healing, and then just anytime the dog gets ahead of you, you can use a verbal command like ah, ah, or whatever your corrective command is, no. And then overlay the collar at the same time so they start to realize that the collar stimulation, it means the exact same thing as your verbal command or verbal correction rather, and then go from there. And then I like them to sit every time we stop and that kind of stuff. So again, easy to use the collar, where if they don't sit and you give the sit command and they still don't sit, then they get nicked with the collar. But I'm looking for the dog to just twitch their neck or in some way acknowledge that they feel some sort of electrical stimulation. I would also encourage everybody to try putting the e-collar on yourself so you're aware of what you're hitting your dog with. I know that sounds a little unusual, but again, I want to know what it takes for my dog to respond. So I usually just put the collar on my wrist, or even these Garmin Alpha collars. I just got these. Their stimulation levels are much different than the Garmin Sport Pro. So just put it on your wrist and just hit yourself with a 1, 2, 3. I mean, you'll see where it starts out as just kind of a tickle, or I think the half, I can't even feel it. The 1, I can't always feel depending on the contact of the points, and then the 2 is where I start to, okay, yeah, I can feel that. It doesn't hurt. I just feel it. And then the 3 on that particular collar is where I can start to feel it. So familiarize yourself with that so that you're more aware of what you're doing to your dog. I feel like that's a safe practice as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the collars that offer this vibrate option as well as the tone, because a lot of dogs, that may be all you need too. You don't actually have to stimulate them. Just hit the vibrate, and especially if they're e-collar conditioned, just that vibrate button is enough for them to go, oh, right, I do have to complete this command as asked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should mention too that I know a lot of people dread force fetch, or even in our world, even though they know that they're probably going to have to do it if they want to pass this test and they want to have any potential future of breeding their dog. I see people get really nervous about it and not like the process, and well, I don't want to punish my dog and so on. But what I would respond to that with is that force fetch is one of my absolute favorite things to do with our young dogs. It's so fun because we get to see progress every single day. I mean, what other kind of training do you do where you get to see some sort of progress every day and you really form this bond? Like they know that every day for that few weeks, you are going to be working with them, and they really relish, that one-on-one time, all of that attention. And even when they're confused, they don't understand what you're asking of them, like you're teaching it to them, and you're just building this incredible level of trust. So I've had like client dogs that are a little standoffish when they get here. They're one-person dogs. And then within a few weeks, not only have they warmed up to me, but like I'm their favorite person in the world. And I might be the one that has to grab their ear and make them cry if they're not listening to me. But then, they are learning the expectations. And I've had dogs then that I don't see for a few years, and then we'll go hunting with them or run into them, and they just immediately, upon hearing my voice or smelling me or whatever it is, they're really excited to see me again, even though they don't like any other dog or any other person in the world besides their owner. They remember that, which is crazy that, they were sent away for this terrible process that everybody dreads, but then they love you for it. So I always tell people, like, whoever force fetches your dog is going to be your dog's favorite person, because it's such a bond cementing process. And it's just so nice to trust your dog. I just love it when I'm hunting, and especially for me, as mostly a pheasant hunter at this time of year. Like that bird is down and it might be wounded and running, and there's not a lot I can do. So I'm just standing there hoping. And just to know that my dog is going to put in 110% and then they're going to bring it back. It's just awesome. And then I'm going to be able to eat it, because they're not going to damage it. I mean, it's just teamwork. And I think that's why we all like hunting with dogs so much in the first place, is because of the teamwork aspect of it. I don't really like hunting if I don't have a dog. It's just not the same experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hunt with my dogs. It just makes the whole thing so enjoyable. So I hope that people realize that there are going to be some points along the force fetch process where you might have to apply some pressure, and you might have to pull your dog's ear, or they might yelp in pain a couple of times as they're trying to figure it out. But, watch a mother dog with her puppies. She's going to snap at them and they're going to cry at some point. But for dogs, it's different. Like they want to have that hierarchy established. They want to know what the boundaries are, what's expected, what's not. So once you build that with them, they're so much more confident and happy. And overall, it's a really fun, positive process. There's just a few negative steps you got to take along the way to enforce. These are commands, not optional. But once they know that, there's so much the better for it.
Do you do any breeding?
I do. I tend to have a litter every, I don't know, 1 to 3 years, however it works out with heat cycles and stuff. So that's really fun too, where you get to then talk to your breeder. Or I enjoy talking with puppy buyers and seeing what traits, are coming from the pups, and we can talk about some force fetch stuff and, what worked well for the mom and the grandma and so on. That might be different than some other force fetch tips you've seen online.
Gotcha.
Because again, some of this stuff is going to vary quite a bit. But it's interesting seeing how the generations are different. Like my current dogs are mother and daughter, and the mother was very, very easy to force fetch. The daughter was a little trickier just because her temperament is a little softer for some reason. And when I say a soft temperament, I just mean like how quickly do they recover from anything negative or something they don't like. So, the mother is just a little tougher, where I could give or apply some pressure to her or issue a correction and she could bounce back right away and be like, all right, well, what's next? Whereas her daughter would almost pout a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But her daughter was a little younger when I force broke her and those kinds of things. And I guess we should have mentioned that earlier too, when talking about when to force fetch a dog and how do you know if it's not mentally mature enough yet. If you have a dog that's just mentally shutting down, like you try to correct it for dropping the dummy and then it won't hold at all. It's just kind of pouting and doesn't want anything to do with it. The tail is down, all of that behavior. Maybe it's a softer tempered dog and it just can't quite take pressure yet. Whereas some dogs, like I said, you can issue the correction. Or maybe you have this in a lot of your squirrel dog breeds too, but have you ever heard someone refer to a dog as a 2x4 dog?
No, but I get the meaning. I've seen some 2x4 mules.
Yeah, occasionally you'll see some 2x4 dogs, and I've had a few client dogs like that where they can really take a lot of pressure, but those are honestly the easiest ones to train because you can give a really hard correction and then they just get over it. I'm like, all right, well, fine, I won't drop it then. Moving on, what's next? I mean, they're just still capable of mentally working out because dogs, again, most of them are really cooperative. They want to figure out what you want in order for them to be a good boy or a good girl. So the soft dogs have a lot harder time trying to think through it. And if they have been corrected on something, then they're like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to freeze up and do nothing. Whereas the tougher dogs, they're like, okay, fine. You want me to hold this? I will hold it. Now what? So tougher dogs are actually easier in many respects. But I think a lot of people getting their first dog, like think they want the calmer, sweeter, softer puppy. And that can be good depending on your personality type, but that's a dog that's going to actually take a lot more time, or you're going to have to go a lot slower through force fetch and any other training process that involves pressure because you can't be hard on them or they're going to shut down.
Do you just keep 2 dogs at a time right now?
I prefer to have two just because it's fun for upland hunting, particularly. It's really nice for pheasant hunting to have a second dog there just to cover a little bit more ground. I love seeing dogs honor each other on point. And then when you wound a rooster, you just double your chances of recovering it when you have 2 dogs out there to retrieve. I have had up to 5 at one time before. And my dogs are in the house too. So sometimes 5 is too many. Just to walk from one room to the other, to have a herd following you is a lot for me. And then I would never put down 5 at a time hunting because that would just scare all the pheasants. But then at the same time, I struggle because I always want a new dog. I really enjoy the training and testing process. And that's kind of how I got into training other people's dogs. I didn't necessarily want or need another dog, but I could take one for a couple months and just train it for them and then give it back. So that's been really fun. But I'm probably getting a 3rd puppy in the next few months, and I need something to do next summer.
Mm-hmm.
But I might have to rotate dogs then. I struggle with that too. And I don't know if squirrel hunters run into this as well, where, we breed these dogs to have the stamina and the ability to hunt all day, every day. But then so many people, we love our dogs, so we just keep getting more. And then you're at the point where you got to rotate dogs, and then some of them are sitting out all the time. And I hate to do that. So I try to keep as many dogs as I think I can hunt without having to give them each a lot of downtime while I'm hunting another dog.
I'm going to have to see if I can come up with another topic to get you back on the show sometime before long. Uh, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's just so fun to talk about dogs. And you know what I really enjoy too about training them for anything is just the problem solving part of it. I don't know about you, but I hate to just go read an article or a book someone else read.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just want to know what the end game is. What is the final expectation for what the dog's supposed to do? And then I love playing with that dog and just trying to figure out, how do I get this dog there? I don't want someone else to tell me. I want to figure it out. And I hope that other people feel the same way and are excited about maybe trying to force fetch their dogs before next squirrel hunting season. Again, I wouldn't do it now for anybody that's listening and thinking, oh, I should do that right away. Get through this hunting season, however much the struggle might be, and then February 1st or March 1st, whatever the day after squirrel season ends in your state, and it's time to get after it. And then you can train a little bit next summer. The whole process should only take 2 to 4 weeks, but then again, you can spend the whole rest of summer just doing really fun retrieving drills using squirrels and rabbits or whatever other game, or just switch back to dummies. That'll be fine too. The dogs will be so excited just to have some work to do next summer. And then they're in physical shape and ready for the hunting season too when you put in all this training. So it really is win-win, and I hope everybody considers it no matter what age their dog is. It'll make for a better partnership in the woods and hopefully more game or more food fit for the table.
Yeah, I've actually reached out to a pretty good number of people trying to get trainers that I've met and people I've met through the bird dogs, trying to find someone that would be willing to come on and talk about force fetch. And the people, they've just all been very, very apprehensive to talk about it, or they don't. I don't know if they don't want to talk about it, worrying about coming off in a bad light, or if they're just trying to hold their secrets close to their chest. Or, but once again, I really appreciate you coming on here.
Sure. And again, it's a hard topic to talk about over the phone or, in a podcast. So I would encourage folks to go watch some of the videos. There's a lot of them because I filmed every single training session with this dog for a few weeks straight. And some days I did 2 days just to try to keep the progress moving. So there are a lot of videos, but watch 1 or 2 at least and just kind of get an idea of some of the steps that we're working through. And then I'm sure, like me, a lot of you are problem solvers and you can figure out where to go from there. But watch a few and see it's not really all about force, even though the name would imply that. It should be a really fun, positive training experience for you and your dog. They will love you for it. There will be some tough moments, but they will love you more for it at the end.
I will be sure and put a link to your YouTube channel in the show notes for anybody listening to be able to help them find it. And I know that you've got another appointment here in a few minutes, so I'll let us wrap it up. And once again, I know I've already said it a few times, but thanks for coming on. I know that this is going to help quite a few people listening. If nothing else, plant a seed of something they might work on furthering some training on their dogs in some different areas than kind of what's conventional.
Yeah. Thanks again for the invitation and enjoy the rest of your hunting season.
All right, everybody. Take care and keep wearing out that boot leather. I just want to give everyone that's listening a sincere thank you. Getting this podcast going has been a project. I really hope you're enjoying it, and if you don't mind, give the show a good rating and review wherever you're listening to it at, or share it on your social media to help get some traction. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to your feedback.